very critical of the then candidate Trump and his rhetoric, slamming against division. She's, of course, the daughter of immigrants. So she's very much played that up. And so when she took this job as UN ambassador, it was surprising to some because of her history with Trump, but they had made amends, and she had been saying that she was supportive of him when she needed to be, and she wasn't afraid to also voice her criticisms of him.
So, Caitlin, President Trump has tweeted out a big announcement with my friend, Nikki Haley. So when you look at that type of wording, there are questions swirling. Will she be reassigned? She declined to comment when she was asked that by a Reuters reporter on the way into the White House. But as you mentioned, their relationship over the years has been tumultuous, and then they've come together. So it would be very interesting to see if she is reassigned or if something happened at the UN. So.
Right. Well, it is very interesting that they are coming to make this announcement together, it seems, present at the White House as well, and the White House confirming this information and saying that they will be talking more about it in just about 10 minutes or so. Nikki Haley was talked about as a potential Secretary of State, just given her perch at the UN and given the experience that she has been collecting in that post. Of course, after Rex Tillerson resigned, the president chose Mike Pompeo, who was the former CIA director, to fill that Secretary of State post, and he and the president enjoy a very good relationship, and they're on good terms. So will be interesting to see whether Nikki Haley might be reassigned, how this decision was reached, whether in fact it was mutual. We still have a lot of questions going into this. This is big news, though, however, because when you talk to people who are not supportive of the president but are in Republican politics, they often point to Nikki Haley as something of a bright light. They point to Nikki Haley and James Mattis, the defense secretary, as kind of the people in the administration who are kind of keeping a lot of things together. And so she does enjoy a lot of support, and some bipartisan support, quite frankly. And again, given that she's been here in New York, given that she has been removed from the chaos in Washington at the UN, she has enjoyed some very positive ratings.
How do you think she would do? I mean, pure speculation here, if she was moved to Washington, D.C. and worked more closely with President Trump, because looking at their history, it's been up and down.
It has been up and down. Remember a couple of months ago when that anonymous op-ed was published in the New York Times from a White House or administration official criticizing the president, Nikki Haley released her own editorial in the Washington Post saying, denying that it was her and saying that if she did have problems with the president, she expresses them to him directly and to the administration. And she called that op-ed very dangerous in terms of what it was doing, that New York Times op-ed. And so she has carved out her own brand, really, in this administration. Now, she was governor of South Carolina, a popular governor, and she made a lot of news in 2016 for calling for the Confederate flag to be removed from State House grounds. That was a cultural touchstone moment in the country. She received a lot of support for that decision, and it was a risky decision, just given the history in South Carolina. And so she kind of has been rising on the national stage, and so we'll see what's next for her.
First Indian American to hold office in the state of South Carolina. She has definitely made history in her political history. Something that's interesting is, when we look at the timing of this, yesterday we were just talking about President Trump and Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein and how there were rumors circulating that he was going to be fired. And we discussed it, that a lot of people may have been advising the president, say, hey, we're only 28 days away from the midterms. Let's keep everything, smooth sailing as we go forward. So a lot of Republicans are saying that they've received this energy boost and the base has been reignited. So since you call her, a shining star in the Republican Party, and she can cross across both parties, would this be maybe a political move to just kind of get some more energy if she is reassigned?
It's a good question, and it all really depends on what happens next for her and what is surrounding this resignation and what that relationship is in fact like as she departs from the administration, as she is planning to do, reportedly. So what's very interesting to consider is that with Rod Rosenstein, if Trump were to fire him, there would be a real negative reaction, not only among Republicans and Democrats, but among the public, because it would signal speak to the more chaotic elements of this administration, given that Rosenstein oversees the Russia probe, and that would introduce a host of issues for this president, both legally and in terms of politics. So we're waiting to see what exactly Nikki Haley is going to do and what exactly are the facts surrounding this resignation. I think could help inform us about what kind of impact this could have in the future.
We do know that we are getting closer. We are waiting a live event from the Oval Office at 10:30 Eastern Standard Time with President Trump and UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, who has resigned. President Trump accepted her resignation earlier today. We do know that the press pool has been moved into the Oval Office, and that event is expected to take place at 10:30. Again, UN Ambassador Nikki Haley has resigned, and we are covering this. We're going to bring you that event live. We're talking with our CBSN political reporter, Caitlin Huey-Burns, who's been covering this administration and, looking at Nikki Haley. We know there's a lot of positive attributes that we have talked about. Has she been under the microscope for anything else that has been swirling around?
Well, she has been, unlike the president, she's been very critical of Russia. She's been also very outspoken when she does disagree with the administration on the way forward when it comes to foreign policy. And she's really, again, carved out an identity for herself, kind of separate of the Trump White House, which has been kind of how she has been able to succeed, really, and kind of garner positive support. There are questions, I would imagine, about that relationship, about those differences as it relates to this post. Remember, the president was just here a couple of weeks ago speaking to the UN General Assembly, and that's really Nikki Haley's bread and butter, of course, given her post at the UN. So I am wondering if there had been conversations then, if there are conversations about their differences as it relates to foreign policy, especially as the president prepares to continue this open relationship and dialogue with North Korea. Pompeo, of course, just meeting with Korean leader Kim Jong-un just this week and returning from that trip. So keeping an eye on whether this is about those differences, whether they are not able to get on the same page, or whether she is being moved to another position, or whether this was a split that was mutually agreed upon.
So many questions. Fascinating to watch and wait, to hear exactly what is happening. But we do know that President Trump tweeted out, "Big announcement with my friend," and I think that's interesting wording there, because there's always speculation that maybe something went wrong. But again, big announcement with my friend, Ambassador Nikki Haley, in the Oval Office at 10:30 a.m. We're just about a minute and a half away from that. We do know that the press pool has gathered in the Oval Office to hear from both of them. There has been speculation that maybe Nikki Haley has been reassigned. She declined to comment as she walked into the Oval Office. Caitlin, what does history show us in terms of a UN ambassador post? How long do they typically stay? Do they stay the whole term?
Well, it is an interesting position because, again, you're not in Washington, you're here in New York, so that gives you some kind of autonomy. And it is a chance for someone like Nikki Haley, who was coming as a governor, was very a long time a political figure. Now this position has allowed her to accumulate foreign policy experience and experience that she would have not otherwise had as governor of South Carolina. So it's seen in some ways as perhaps a launching pad for higher office, which is why lots of folks kind of speculated at the beginning that she had her eyes on bigger ambitions beyond the UN. It can be really a launching pad for higher office if she indeed chose to do so. There was speculation, of course, last year when the president was feuding with Rex Tillerson privately that Nikki Haley might be someone who would assume that role and that might give her a bigger platform. He, of course, chose Mike Pompeo, the former CIA director, who has a great relationship with the president, and the president speaks very highly of him. You do know that language, though, that the president has been using to describe Nikki Haley as my friend, the fact that this is kind of seeming to be a formal rollout, first reported by Axios and now confirmed. The White House expected to talk in a couple of minutes here and explain more about the decision-making process.
That's right. It is 10:30 Eastern Standard Time, and we are awaiting an announcement from President Trump from the Oval Office with UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, who has resigned, really sending shockwaves throughout the political world this morning. It doesn't seem as if that was expected at all. Caitlin, you mentioned that she just recently wrote that rebuttal to the anonymous op-ed, and I just want to read a little bit of that as we are waiting for this announcement from the Oval Office. And Nikki Haley wrote in there that the author might think he or she is doing a service to the country. I strongly disagree. What this senior official in the Trump administration has done and is apparently intent on continuing to do is a serious disservice, not just to the president, but to the country. She went on to write, I too am a senior Trump administration official. I proudly serve in this administration, and I enthusiastically support most of its decisions and the direction it is taking the country. So reading that, this seems as if it was going to be the last thing we were going to be discussing today.
Right, exactly. But also, you know, what was really interesting about when that New York Times op-ed came out, everyone in the White House and outside of it was playing the speculation game, trying to find who was the writer of that op-ed. You had many administration officials, including the vice president, have to come out and say that it wasn't them. And so Nikki Haley's rebuttal, that published rebuttal, was really remarkable and making clear, she was trying to make clear that it wasn't her, and that she said that while she does have serious disagreements with the president, she voices them to him directly, and she called that New York Times op-ed something of a dangerous endeavor to go down that route. What is very interesting, though, is that a lot of Republicans have had their eye on Nikki Haley. Before Donald Trump kind of came into force, she was considered a potential presidential candidate herself. Her endorsement in the 2016 presidential primary on the Republican side was among the most coveted, because she did kind of represent that new Republican brand, that more inclusive and diverse Republican brand that the party was selling, of course, before 2016, or trying to sell. She endorsed Marco Rubio in South Carolina, and that was considered something of a launching point for him, but we know how that turned out. The party decided to go the other way. Haley had been very critical of Donald Trump and his rhetoric throughout the 2016 campaign. They made amends after his election, and of course she was appointed to this post. And this post was seen as a real opportunity for her, not only to accrue foreign policy experience and more experience on kind of a national stage, and also perhaps giving her a platform for a presidential run down the road or some higher office, in addition to her experience as 2 terms of South Carolina governor.
You bring up a fascinating point, her ambition for higher office. We have seen, different hints at that. How would you see that playing out, and would you expect her to challenge President Trump going forward, or how would that play out?
There are a lot of never Trumpers, as we call them, who would like to see some kind of challenge. On paper, it would seem that the president would be ripe for an intra-party challenge, given his unpopularity nationally, but he is very popular among Republicans and still remains so. And any challenge among Republicans would really be in vain at this point. And so it's not clear whether she would wage that, although lots of folks in the Republican Party who do not like Trump, do not like his style, point to her as a bright spot in the administration, and the fact that she has stayed from the beginning when we've seen so many departures in this White House. Her staying in that position was pretty much an anomaly. Her, James Mattis, of course, the Secretary of Defense, is still there, and a couple of others, but that we have seen so many departures in this White House. Now, we are approaching a midterm, and there typically in administrations, people start to reevaluate their positions. It really depends. We'll see whether the president faces serious political consequences in November for some of the things that he has done and said. We're still kind of keeping an eye on that. But this is really big news coming from Washington, just given that we have been watching her really come into this position and define herself and carve out her own identity in this post.
Let's just bring everybody up to speed. We are following breaking news out of Washington, D.C. UN Ambassador Nikki Haley has resigned. We are waiting for a an event, a live event out of the Oval Office any minute now. We are expecting to hear from President Trump and Nikki Haley from the Oval Office. It was scheduled at 10:30. It is now 10:35 Eastern Standard Time. President Trump tweeting out just a short time ago, big announcement with my friend, UN Ambassador Nikki Haley at 10:30 out of the Oval Office. Again, as Caitlin Huey-Burns is reporting right now, this is big news coming out of Washington. A lot of unanswered questions. Has she been reassigned? Was she asked to resign? Did this take the president off guard? When did she make this decision? So many unanswered questions. We do know that the press pool is waiting in the Oval Office, ready to answer so many of those questions. Caitlin, just looking at possible replacements, who would come up in your mind?
It's a good question, especially how critical this role has been. Remember, just a few weeks ago, the president was in New York for the United Nations General Assembly, and Nikki Haley has been kind of at the forefront of that, of course, given this role. So there is a big question about who would fill that position, especially given the items at hand, North Korea, of course, being front and center at this point. The other question I have, too, is whether she is, in fact, reassigned or whether she is leaving, whether she becomes active on the midterm campaign trail, given that she is, if she's not reassigned, that she could be free to do that. Of course, she is really beloved by Republicans. She and Lindsey Graham, the senator from South Carolina, are very close, given they share a home state and have worked closely together. Of course, Graham, being a key ally of the president, has emerged as his top ally in the Senate at this point. So I'm very interested to see the way in which the president views this and how they came to this decision.
All right. Well, as we wait for this announcement from the Oval Office with President Trump and Nikki Haley, we want to bring in our CBS News State Department reporter Kylie Atwood, who is joining us now with this news. Kylie, your reaction? What are you hearing?
Well, I've been making calls for the past 15 minutes since this news broke, and shockingly, none of Haley's aides are answering the phone. But one of the things that I think is actually really important to note is that though Nikki Haley came in and has been a consistent supporter of President Trump throughout, a lot of the people that I'm calling today are folks that have been working with Nikki Haley since she was the governor of South Carolina. Her top policy person, who's based here in Washington, D.C., was a pollster with her working in South Carolina. A lot of her top aides who have been working with her at the United Nations in New York came with her from South Carolina as well. So even though she was a big part of this administration, she definitely had her own little group of people that were very close to her, and it was hard to find out what was happening within the smallness of that group.
And we just want to remind our viewers that we are waiting for this announcement out of the Oval Office at 10:30. We're a little past that now. Kylie Atwood is following this story with us out of the State Department, and Caitlin Huey-Burns is here on set with me, a CBSN political reporter. We're also just looking up, Nikki Haley was on Face the Nation on September 23rd, and just kind of looking over her transcript here, Caitlin, right now, I'm just looking to see if there was anything that might have hinted at this. She discussed with John Dickerson different topics. And as I go through this and just look at this transcript, just go over the relationship and the history with President Trump. It's been on again, off again, and how they've come together.
Yes, it has been an on again, off again relationship. Indeed, during 2016, she was a key critic of him. She was an ally of Jeb Bush, given that they both served as governor. She spoke with him. She ended up endorsing Marco Rubio, the Florida senator, in that Republican primary, that very crowded Republican primary. And when she gave that endorsement, it was seen as a big boost in South Carolina to Rubio. Of course, Trump ended up taking that state. But what was very interesting about Haley was that she wasn't afraid to be critical of then candidate Trump. She criticized his rhetoric. She gave a response. She was tapped by Republicans to give a response to then President Obama's final State of the Union in 2016, and she really evoked her immigrant history, her parents, of course. She really was critical, without naming Trump, of the rhetoric that he was espousing, and she tried to strike a more conciliatory tone and a more inclusive tone in that speech, and that was something in that rebuttal, and that was something that a lot of folks had their eye on at the time. Of course, Trump won the nomination, won the election, and Haley joined his administration. She has since said, and Kylie can speak to this more directly, she has said in that Washington Post op-ed that she is opposes the president or voices her concerns when she needs to, and joins him when she feels that is correct. She has been inoculated in some respects from the drama going on in Washington, given her perch here in New York, and that has helped, I think, to has helped her in this position, but also she is still very popular among the general public, when many folks associated with the administration are not.
Kylie, weigh in on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, Haley through and through has been the one who said when she has problems with the president, she takes him on directly. So she has been an advocate for a lot of his policies. And when she doesn't agree, she marches into the White House, to the Oval Office, to tell him that. A few things that she has been an advocate for with this administration. Number one was moving the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem in Israel. She was a big proponent of that. And since that has happened, she has been the one to face the blowback on the world stage at the UN, because most countries didn't agree with the U.S. in that decision. And she has also been the one to take that a bit personally. Much like the president, some of the criticism that she receives goes deep with her. And so as we have seen this administration pull back its aid from UNRWA, which is a UN organization that provides support to Palestinian refugees. That's something that Nikki Haley was very supportive of, because the Palestinians treated the U.S. with such frustration, with such anger after they moved the Israel embassy. And so there have been a lot of these issues where, you know, Haley has been the leading voice, and she's not afraid to get out there and be vocal about it. She actually was the one at one point who said that the Trump administration was going to be putting new sanctions on Russia, and then they didn't do it. And she said, I wasn't wrong. This was a point of conflict in the White House. There was some confusion there, but I knew exactly what I was doing. This is not someone who has ever stepped back from what she believes is right and from the policies that she's advocating for. I also want to point out that she had a very frosty relationship with the first Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson. They did not get along. She would come to Washington. She wouldn't even tell Rex Tillerson's staff that she was here. It was sort of like they had this competition for power. Who was the one who was the leading voice for foreign policy for the Trump administration? And she felt that she had a closer relationship with Trump. Tillerson didn't see a need to really develop a relationship with Nikki Haley.
Right, and Kylie, let me just interrupt you just for a moment, because we're starting to get some reports from a pool reporter in the Oval Office, and we're told that Mr. Trump said, Nikki Haley has been very special to me. She's done an incredible job, fantastic person. She gets it. She's been at the UN since the beginning. She told me 6 months ago, maybe at the end of the year, she wants to take a break. Was governor, this perhaps even more intense. I'm reading off some rough notes here. He also mentioned that North Korea is moving along well. Pompeo thinks the world of her. All happy for you, but hate to lose you. At the end of the year, she will be leaving. We'll be in constant touch. So we're getting some new details about UN Ambassador Nikki Haley's resignation. We do know that she will be leaving at the end of the year. We do not know what's next for her. Has she been reassigned? And who her possible replacement will be. Kylie, I didn't mean to cut you off, but go ahead on to your thought.
No, I mean, those comments are pretty nondescript, right?
Right.
They say that she's leaving. They're not saying why. They're not pointing to any bad blood between the White House and Nikki Haley. They're saying that she has a good relationship with Pompeo. As I was saying, her relationship with Rex Tillerson, the previous Secretary of State, wasn't that great. So she's walking out the door in good standing with this president, it seems. We're going to have to get down to the bottom of why she's choosing to walk out the door.
Exactly. And just to fill everybody in, if you're just joining us, UN Ambassador Nikki Haley has resigned her post. We are still waiting for an announcement from President Trump out of the White House. It was scheduled at 10:30 when he tweeted out, big announcement with my friend Nikki Haley out of the Oval Office at 10:30. We do know that she is going to be leaving at the end of the year. Caitlin Huey-Burns is also here, CBSN political reporter, breaking down and trying to analyze exactly, what's taking place in Washington just 28 days from the midterms.
That's a really important point here. We're just a month away from the midterms, and you would imagine that this kind of shakeup would be startling to some. Now, you have to consider that Haley, again, is not involved in the day-to-day politics going on in the administration because she's here in New York, focused on foreign policy at her perch in the UN, and she has been really able to carve out an identity for herself. And many have seen this position for her as a launching pad for something else eventually, whether that be a presidential run of her own or something else. Of course, she is very popular across the country, but also really popular among Republicans who have seen her as kind of a rising star in the party, someone that the so-called never-Trumpers or those who don't like President Trump point to her as kind of a bright light in this administration. And I think that you'll hear from many of them a disappointment that she is leaving if, in fact, she is not reassigned or going somewhere else. I also wonder if she might be, if she's not going somewhere else in the administration and she is leaving this post, whether in fact she will become more politically active, whether she will be more engaged in politics. There are a lot of never-Trumpers who might like to see her challenge the president. I think that is a longer shot at this point, given that he remains so popular among Republicans at this point. And you're seeing a lot of Republican candidates this cycle endear themselves to him in places that he is popular.
Kylie, I'm just, speculating here in terms of possible political aspirations for Nikki Haley. Have you ever heard speculation that President Trump might consider her as a vice president, a vice presidential candidate going forward? As we all know, women on the Democratic side, they're gearing up for quite a fight in the next election.
Yeah, that's right. I actually haven't heard about the vice president spot as a ticket for Nikki Haley, though, because I think what she's done in this administration and what a lot of top administration officials have tried to do is be supportive of the president, but also carve out their own niche and try and be
Kylie, let me interrupt you because this is big. Haley just told reporters in the Oval Office she will be campaigning for President Trump in 2020. So obviously, no hints at bad blood there.
No hint of bad blood there. That still doesn't close the possibility of her personal political future being one that could be distinct to that of President Trump's when his administration is over at the White House, whether it be in 2020 or 2024. She is a person who has extensive political ambitions, and her team has never been necessarily discreet about that. They know that she is a very forceful, compassionate woman with a really great American story. She herself is an immigrant. She has Indian parents. She talks about that. And so I think that to say that her political future is tied to Trump's just because she's campaigning for him isn't necessarily true, but it does show that she's still supportive of this president.
Okay. What do you make of that announcement, Caitlin, that she will be campaigning for him in 2020?
Well, I think certainly, just to pick up on that point, it's not like anybody really wants to rock the boat for the party at this point either. So it makes a lot of political sense to say that she is remaining supportive of the president. There could be a lot of different factors that go into this. But another thing to keep in mind about Haley, in addition to what Kylie was saying in terms of how she has been really admired by many Republicans Republicans, just given her background. In 2016, she took what was seen as a big political risk in calling for the Confederate flag to be removed from State House grounds in South Carolina while she was governor. That was in the middle of a national debate over that. And of course, this was shortly after that horrific and tragic shooting of innocent African-American parishioners by a white man in that church in Charleston. And that was something that really rocked the country. And she called for the removal of the Confederate flag from State House grounds shortly after that in 2016. And a lot of people in the Republican Party and, quite frankly, outside of it, look to her as a model for addressing this in that really tough political time. And so she has really risen to prominence over the past several years, given her background, given her ability to really kind of engage the moment. And so she has been considered someone who does have ambitions beyond this, and we'll see how that shakes out. This is a position that would kind of allow a launching pad for higher office.
Kylie, weigh in on that a little bit, because looking back at former tweets from President Trump, today he's tweeting out a big announcement with my friend. A while ago, it wasn't too many years ago, when he tweeted out that the people of South Carolina are embarrassed by her. So definitely a tumultuous past between the two. Talking about taking risks, how big of a risk was it to be President Trump's UN ambassador if she wants to go on for higher office herself?
I think that's a great point. I mean, it was a big risk, and I think most people would say that she's played it pretty well. She's been forceful where she needs to be. I want to point out, though, that doesn't mean she has been part of every single policy discussion in terms of foreign policy and this White House. North Korea, that's a baton that is held by Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Another decision that was recently made that we put a lot of focus on was the new refugee numbers coming out of this administration. They cut the refugee numbers that are to be let in next year to 30,000. That's the lowest number that we have seen in more than 30 years. And Haley was not in the last discussions about that number. So there were some frustrations on behalf of her team in terms of not giving the last final say, especially because she comes from refugee parents. So there have been moments where they haven't been lockstep. But, as Caitlin said, I mean, Haley is someone with political ambitions, and so she knows where to pick her battles and where not to. She knows, when we saw the anonymous op-ed from a senior administration official come out a few weeks ago, she wrote a counter op-ed to that, basically saying that she is in line with the president, and when she disagrees with him, she does so directly.
All right, we want to bring in on the phone Leslie Sanchez, our Republican strategist. And Leslie, there's a lot of speculation going on right now. There's some speculation that the Attorney General, Pete Sessions, if he left office, South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham could be considered for that position, opening up another seat in South Carolina, a Senate seat, which could go to Nikki Haley. So talk us through that whole scenario.
Sure. There's a lot of buzz in South Carolina right now of that exact viability and possibility. And many people speculate that this is kind of moving, setting up the shuffling of the cards and these cabinet positions post-election day. So it's creating opportunities and openings that do not have to be filled until after the election, because this was always this idea not to do something dramatic with Sessions until the midterms were over. Mm-hmm. So if something like that were to happen and Lindsey Graham were to move into a position at justice, which he has often said he did not want to do, that he was very happy, let's just reiterate, very happy where he is. And he waited a long time. If you go back to Strom Thurmond, he waited a long time for that opening to be vacant in the Senate for South Carolina. But what it does do is create some exciting possibilities for the Republican Party, and especially in unifying the Republican Party. Nikki Haley is somebody who's extremely popular. She has an independent stance. When she went into the UN, she had some guidelines and stipulations. She wanted to be a policy person. She wanted to be somebody that she said other than a wallflower. She wanted to be part of the decision-making process. And I think she can walk away feeling she did that. if she became and was appointed to fill an open seat in the Senate, many believe it would open the door for her to be a VP or a presidential candidate in the future. And so, again, it's about lining up for 2, 4, 6 years from now.
All right. Stay there, Leslie. We'll chat with you a little bit more in just a second. I just want to give you some more color, some comments that are coming out of the Oval Office from Nikki Haley. She apparently said that her 2 years as the United Nations ambassador has been an honor of a lifetime. She said, "We will put our embassy where we want to put our embassy. The U.S. is strong again in a way people should be proud of." She went on to say that she can't say enough good things about Jared and Ivanka. "Thank you to my family." And then she also said that nothing is set on where I am going to go. Was governor for 6 years, 8 years of intense time. I believe in term limits. She said she is not running for president in 2020. She will support President Trump. She believes government officials need to move on. We also are getting word that President Trump, who said when we came into office, almost inevitable in eyes of the world that we would be going to war with North Korea, alluding to the fact that UN Ambassador Nikki Haley really helped play a role there. He also thanked Haley and said this is an appropriate way of doing it. In terms of a successor, he said there are a number of people who would like to do this. It is a much more glamorous position than it was a couple of years ago. Kylie, how much of a role did Nikki Haley play in elevating the role of UN ambassador?
Oh, I mean, you know, she would say that she played a huge role in that. I think there would be some who would contest because there have been past ambassadors to the UN who have obviously had a really public role as well, Samantha Power being one of those. But what's a little bit different about Nikki Haley and former ambassadors to the UN for many administrations is that Nikki Haley is very political. And that's not always the case for this role. It's someone who has to work with world leaders. It's someone who has to kind of see where they can work together, where they can push together. It's not necessarily someone who is pushing the agenda of the White House. And that was what Nikki Haley continued to do time and time again. And she often got points from this White House for how tough she was against leaders on the international stage who weren't in line with President Trump. She said at one point, you know, we are taking names when that decision was made about moving the embassy in Israel and world leaders came out against Trump. She basically was threatening that if you are not supportive of the policy of this White House, you better get ready because there might be something coming your way which isn't going to be so great. So she wasn't afraid to make it a political position, and that is what is a bit different about her and how she decided to approach this role.
So we do know that the press has left the Oval Office, and they are going to be feeding tape back so we can listen in to the event that just played out there in the Oval Office between President Trump and former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley. She's set to resign at the end of this year. On the phone with us is Republican strategist Leslie Sanchez, who joined our conversation. And, you know, Leslie, I never got to ask you, but did you have any indication that this would happen?
No, I think that's what's surprising. It's interesting to see she told her staff this morning. For many who wondered about Nikki Haley in the cabinet from the beginning, after the president's win in 2016, it was always a question of how the dynamic would work together, especially since there was some contention in the 2016 presidential. She had sided with Marco Rubio as her candidate. And it's interesting because Marco Rubio even defended her earlier this year when she ran into some kind of political problems. He came out and came out to her defense. So the alliances were always different, and the president is big on loyalty. So the interesting part is that she waited to that 2-year mark, and that's kind of a funny, in politics, that's a funny term because you do your time. It's a bit of service. You wait your 2 years and then you go do something else. So I feel she was a good soldier and a good a member for the president and sharing her opinion. And it was often a differing opinion. And she's strong enough to stand there and express that to the president and still support his ideals and be that political role that we just talked about. That's a very unique blend.
Go ahead, Caitlin.
It has been, just to pick up on that point, it has been very interesting to watch Nikki Haley really be unafraid in carving out her own identity and in making clear when she disagrees with the president and the administration. Remember, just recently, when there was talk of additional sanctions against Russia, Larry Kudlow, the president's economic advisor, said that Nikki Haley, who had just been on the Sunday shows talking about it, may have been confused, and she had responded, "I don't get confused." And so she has been unabashed about sticking up for herself in this administration, and again, really forging ahead with her own identity here. And I think it's really important to note that as we're looking at the pool reports from the White House and the president's, the way in which the president has been talking about Nikki Haley, saying that she has been very special to me, she has done an incredible job, she's a fantastic person, she gets it. She told me 6 months ago that maybe at the end of the year she wanted to take a break. If in fact Nikki Haley has political ambitions or is really seriously thinking about them going ahead, that support from the president leaving on good terms from this White House would be critical in terms of kind of building that support. But I was really struck by this idea that she told me 6 months ago, the president said, that maybe at the end of the year. And I'm wondering, maybe Kylie can speak to this. Nikki Haley, of course, moved to New York from South Carolina. She has young children. I'm wondering if that is, of course, this is a strenuous job.
All right, let's listen in to what happened in the Oval Office.
Before we begin, I'll just say that we're very well prepared from the incoming hurricane. We have another one coming, so we've done very well. North Carolina, South Carolina, Texas, Florida, Puerto Rico, so many places. And we have another one coming in, a big one, much bigger than they anticipated a week ago, 7 days ago. I heard for the first time there was a very small drop of weather that looked like it was forming, and now it's pretty close to a Category 3 if it's not already a Category 3. So we are very well prepared. FEMA's ready. We're all ready. Spoke with Governor Scott. Spoke to everybody that you have to speak to, and I think that hopefully we'll get lucky, but maybe that won't happen. But we're prepared. I wanted to do this because Nikki Haley, Ambassador to the United Nations, has been very special to me. She's done an incredible job. She's a fantastic person, very importantly, but she also is somebody that gets it. She has been at the United Nations from the beginning with us, right from the beginning, and worked with us on the campaign. It's been really a long time, very intense, and she told me probably 6 months ago, she said, maybe at the end of the year, at the end of a 2-year period, but at the end of the year, I want to take a little time off. I want to take a little break. She's been a very successful, as you know, governor of South Carolina for 8 years. And then she did this, and this is possibly even more intense with what's going on in the world, and very dangerous and a lot of things. But she's done a fantastic job, and we've done a fantastic job together. We've solved a lot of problems, and we're in the process of solving a lot of problems. At the beginning, North Korea was a massive problem, and now we're moving along. It's moving along really nicely. I can speak for Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. He thinks the world of Nikki, and so we're all happy for you in one way, but we hate to lose. Hopefully you'll be coming back at some point, but you want to just, in maybe a different capacity. You can have your pick. But I just want to let you know, so at the end of the year, Nikki will be leaving, and we'll be in constant touch. I know that whenever you have any ideas, you're going to call me because you know all the players. And that was really the thing I think she did best at the United Nations. She got to know the players. She got to know China, Russia, India. She knows everybody on a very first-name basis, and they like her, except for maybe a couple, which is normal, right? They can't all like you, but they do. They really like her, and I think maybe more importantly, they respect her. So, Nikki, I just wanted to tell you that we will miss you. We'll be speaking all the time, but we will miss you nevertheless, and you have done a fantastic job, and I want to thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, I want to say, first of all, I want to thank the president for just, allowing us to come out and talk to you this way. It has been an honor of a lifetime. I said I am such a lucky girl to have been able to lead the state that raised me and to serve a country I love so very much has really been a blessing, and I want to thank you for that. But I'm most excited, look at the 2 years. Look at what has happened in 2 years with the United States on foreign policy. Now, the United States is respected. Countries may not like what we do, but they respect what we do. They know that if we say we're going to do something, we follow it through, and the president proved that, whether it was with the chemical weapons in Syria, whether it's with NATO, saying that other countries have to pay their share. I mean, whether it's the trade deals, which have been amazing, they get that the president means business, and they follow through with that. But then if you look at just these 2 years at the UN, we've cut $1.3 billion in the UN's budget. We've made it stronger, we've made it more efficient. South Sudan, we got an arms embargo, which was a long time coming. 3 North Korean sanctions packages, which were the largest in a generation, done in a way that we could really work towards denuclearizing North Korea. The Iran deal, bringing attention to the world that every country needs to understand you can't overlook all of the bad things they're doing. You have to see them for the threat that they are. I think you look at the anti-Israel bias and the strength and courage that the president showed in moving the embassy and showing the rest of the world, we will put our embassy where we want to put our embassy. You know, all of those things have made a huge difference in the U.S. standing, but I can tell you that the U.S. is strong again, and the U.S. is strong in a way that should make all Americans very proud. And I do want to say that it's not just the president I want to thank. The family in general, the First Lady has been nothing but very, very kind to me. I can't say enough good things about Jared and Ivanka. Jared is such a hidden genius that no one understands. I mean, to redo the NAFTA deal the way he did, what I've done working with him on the Middle East peace plan, it is so unbelievably well done. And Ivanka's been just a great friend, and they do a lot of things behind the scenes that I wish more people knew about, because we're a better country because they're in this administration. I also just have to say, certainly thank you to my family. Michael is a saint, and my 2 little ones, I adore them. And to Team USUN. You know, they sacrificed a lot. They put a lot of time and energy into it, but they have a lot of heart and really wanted to make America proud. And so with that, I'm not leaving until the end of the year. My goal is that we make sure that everything is in good place and for the next ambassador to come in. But it's a great day in the United States, and I'm proud to have been part of the team. Now, I don't have anything set on where I'm going to go. I think that the main thing was I was governor for 6 years, and we dealt with a hurricane, a 1,000-year flood, a church shooting, a school shooting. There was a lot, and then to come in and do 2 years of Russia and Iran and North Korea, it's been 8 years of intense time, and I'm a believer in term limits. I think you have to be selfless enough to know when you step aside and allow someone else to do the job. So thank you, Mr. President. It's been an honor of a lifetime. And I will say this, for all of you that are going to ask about 2020, no, I'm not running for 2020. I can promise you what I'll be doing is campaigning for this one. So I look forward to supporting the president in the next election.
That's so good. Thank you, Nikki.
Ambassador Haley, you listed off a long list of accomplishments. Why would you want to leave that all behind? Is it really a personal decision because you've been away from your family for so long, or is there something else too?
My family is very supportive. So no, there's no personal reasons. I think that it's just very important for government officials to understand when it's time to step aside. And I have given everything I've got these last 8 years. And I do think that sometimes it's good to rotate in other people who can put that same energy and power into it. So there really is, a lot of people are going to want to say there's a lot of reasons why I'm leaving. The truth is, I want to make sure that this administration, the president, has the strongest person to fight. It was a blessing to go into the UN with body armor every day and defend America. And I'll always do that. I'll never truly step aside from fighting for our country. But I will tell you that I think it's time.
And Mr. President, why make the announcement now as opposed to after the midterms?
Well, Nikki's going to be staying till the end of the year, which will be just about 2 years. And I just think, and I was just, as Nikki was speaking, I was thinking when we came into office, it was almost inevitable in the minds of many that we were going to war with North Korea. If you ask President Obama, I'm sure he'll tell you that that was by far his biggest problem when we sat and met right here. But that looked like a real problem. Iran looked like a real problem. It was a question of when would they take over the Middle East prior to my coming here, and now Iran is fighting for their lives. They've got riots in all their cities. It's blowing up. Their inflation, their economy is in tatters. And at some point, they'll probably come and want to make a real deal, not the deal that they made, the ridiculous deal that they made. That was unacceptable to me. And so we'll see what happens. But what a difference between Iran when we first came, I'd like to say the day before we came, and also if you look at North Korea, I mean, there was a deal that there was something that was, it was a devastating, potentially devastating problem, and now the relationships are very good. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo just left, had a great meeting, also was in China, also spoke to many of the Asian leaders or went there and had some good meetings, but had a really very good meeting with North Korea and Chairman Kim, and we've just made a lot of progress on so many other fronts also. And I think the world, as Nikki said, the world is really respecting the United States again, much more so than they have in many, many decades. We are respected again, that I can tell you, very much respected again. And people want to be on our side. Even if you look at the votes in the United Nations, I mean, votes that we would normally get no votes, we're getting very strong votes now. So I just want to thank Nikki, and I thought this would be an appropriate way of doing it, because when you write it out on a piece of paper that, you know, Ambassador Haley will be leaving, and you say nice things, people say, well, what's going on? This is the right way to do it. And when you really think somebody's done a terrific job, I felt this was an appropriate way of doing it, and we both liked it. So I just want to thank the ambassador. I just want to thank Nikki, okay?
Mr. President, what are you thinking about the successor?
Well, we have a number of people that would very much like to do it. It's a great position, and Nikki realizes it. I think she's helped make it a much better position, if you want to know the truth. I think it's become maybe a more glamorous position than it was 2 years ago. Maybe I wonder why, but it is. Yeah, I mean, she's made it a very glamorous position. She's made it a more importantly, a more important position. So we have, I can almost say, many people that want to do it, and they're very good people. And I'll be talking also to Nikki about that, and to the general about that, and to my staff. But we have many people that are very, very much interested in doing it.
You said you just saw Secretary Pompeo. Are you frustrated by the lack of actual announcements that are coming?
No, not only am I not frustrated, I think it's incredible what's happening. You're talking about North Korea? It's amazing the way the media, who are you with?
With France 24.
With who?
France 24.
France.
So it's amazing the way the media says that, you know, for 80 years they couldn't do a thing. And what are we in, 3 months of negotiation? It's ridiculous. As I've said about 1,000 times, you have no rockets flying, you have no missiles flying, you have no nuclear testing, you have nuclear closings, they're closing up different areas of North Korea. We're getting the remains back, it's already started, of our great heroes. We got our hostages back, and I didn't pay $1.8 billion like the previous administration. I paid nothing. But I have agreed to meet, and I have agreed to spend time. But how long has it been since we left Singapore? It was 3 months or so. And people say, that's the media saying, like, how can we be negative? Let's see, he's done really well. How can we be negative? Oh, are you disappointed with the speed? I think the speed is amazing. You have no nuclear tests, you have no rockets, and we have a very good relationship with Chairman Kim, which is very important. I like him, he likes me, the relationship is good. Mike Pompeo had a very, very good meeting. I mean, I spoke to him at length yesterday, and he'll be coming back. He'll be back tonight. And so, I mean, just the opposite. I think we've made incredible progress. Beyond incredible. Beyond. I don't think some of the press, I must some of the press really covers it accurately and right, but some of the press really doesn't. Yes, John?
Do you want to take this opportunity to tell us when your next meeting with Kim will be and where it will be?
Well, it is happening, and we're setting that up right now. That was part of the reason that Mike was going over to meet. They're setting up the meeting, and we'll be announcing that, probably a different location. Singapore was fantastic, but we'll probably do a different location.
Can you get it tomorrow, Lago?
He'd probably like that. I'd like that too. I think it would be good, but we'll see. We're talking about 3 or 4 different locations. Timing won't be too far away. We've made a lot of progress, and this meeting really is to, people don't realize the importance of the first meeting. I mean, we said point number 1, denuclearization. And for some reason, the press doesn't pick that up. But that was actually point number 1. They've agreed to denuclearization. And they continue to agree, and they continue. Now, we haven't removed sanctions, as you know. People said, what have we done? We haven't removed sanctions. We have very big sanctions. I'd love to remove them, but we have to get something for doing it.
Any chance the meeting could be on U.S. soil?
Well, I don't want to embarrass anybody by asking. I think eventually we're going to have lots of meetings on U.S. soil and on their soil, by the way. It's just, that's a two-way street, on their soil also. I think that the country of North Korea is going to be a very successful country. I think it's going to be incredibly economically successful, and I want to make it that way. I think it's going to be great. Other countries, other people, entrepreneurs, banks, I will tell you, they're calling, wanting to go there and wanting to invest. At some point, when Chairman Kim makes that decision, I think he's going to unleash something that's going to be spectacular, really spectacular. And I think he knows it, and I think that's one of the reasons that we're having very successful conversations. I think he wants to get on with it.
Mr. President, when will a successor
Yes.
to Ambassador Haley be named?
Excuse me?
When will a successor to Ambassador Haley be named? When?
What is it?
When will a successor be named?
Oh, I would say we'll name a successor, I don't know, within the next 2 or 3 weeks. Maybe sooner.
Mr. President, have you spoken to the Saudis about the missing weapons request?
I have not, no I haven't, but I will be at some point.
What do you know at this point?
I know nothing right now. I know what everybody else knows, nothing. Just,
What's your response to Hillary Clinton saying last night's swearing in of Judge Kavanaugh was more a political event than it was a national event?
I guess that's why she lost. She doesn't get it. She never did. I knew that a long time ago. Hillary never got it. That's why she lost. Anything else?
Sir, the midterms are in 4 weeks.
Yeah.
What's your prediction right now for the GOP, and how's your stamina out on the campaign trail?
I think we're going to do well. What you people would say, I guess, if you saw there was a 5% drop-off, you'd say there's something wrong with the president. You would say, but no, I'm going to Iowa tonight. We have a big, big crowd. We're going to make a big announcement tonight, by the way, in Iowa. We're going to be making a very big announcement. And I have to say the farmers are so thrilled with the USMCA, the new agreement. I don't use the word NAFTA because NAFTA was a disaster for our country. NAFTA, we lost millions and millions of jobs, thousands and thousands of factories and plants, and bad for farmers. You look what happened. Farmers over the last 15 years, it's only gone down. Now they're going to go up. We just opened up Mexico. We just opened up Canada. And it's great for our farmers. But I'm going to Iowa tonight, and we'll be talking a little ethanol tonight. And got some great things planned. And speaking of that, I will say, if you look at industries, the steel industry in this country is back like nothing I've ever seen before. In a period of 6 months since we started doing what I'm doing, the steel industry has literally revived. U.S. Steel is opening up 8 plants. Nucor is opening up. The steel industry in our country is really, really hot. So it's really been great. But I'll be going to Iowa tonight.
What about Secretary Pompeo's meeting in China? How did that go?
Very well. Very well. No, we're very well. We have a very good relationship with China, but they took out $500 billion out of our country for many years, each year, and we just can't let that happen. This should have been talked about by people in this chair for many years. Look, for years and years, they were taking out $200, $300, $400, and even $500 billion a year. We helped rebuild China. If we don't do that, China's not where they are right now. And that's fine with me, but we're not doing it any longer.
You promised more tariffs on China if they retaliate.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Are you going to go forward with that?
100%. If they do that, if they retaliate, what does retaliate mean? They've already retaliated. They've taken out $500 billion. I think that's the ultimate retaliation. Now, look, China wants to make a deal, and I say they're not ready yet. I just say they're not ready yet. And we've canceled a couple of meetings because I just say they're not ready to make a deal. We can't have a one-way street. It's got to be a two-way street. It's been a one-way street for 25 years. We've got to make it a two-way street. We've got to benefit also. Okay? Thank you. Any other questions? So I just want to finish, because this is really the pure reason for this, is Nikki, you've been fantastic. You're my friend. And I just, on behalf of the country, I want to thank you for a great job. Thank you, Nikki. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So there you have it, President Trump and UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, who just resigned today. Nothing but praise between the two as we listened for about 20 minutes of their remarks from the Oval Office. We have a team of correspondents covering this breaking development out of Washington. Here in New York with me is CBSN political reporter Caitlin Huey-Burns. We have State Department reporter Kylie Atwood, Washington correspondent Paula Reed at the White House, and on the phone with us, Republican strategist Leslie Sanchez. Paula, I want to start with you and get your takeaway from this. We heard so much praise between the two, but something that stood out to me was when President Trump said to Nikki that maybe you will come back in a different capacity. You can have your pick.
Quite a tease there. Well, this was a very dignified departure. A lot of people thought today would just be a victory lap for the president after swearing in his second Supreme Court justice. But the news came out, sort of breaking across the wires, that Nikki Haley was going to tender her resignation. There was a lot of, oh my goodness, what happened, why? But then this hastily arranged press avail gave him an opportunity for both of them to do a dignified departure. He had nothing but praise for his UN ambassador. He called her fantastic. He said she had done an incredible job. And their story about why she's leaving is that he said about 6 months ago, she came to him and said that she wanted to depart. So she won't actually be leaving until the end of this year. She said she wanted to depart at about the 2-year mark. And he said he'll announce her successor, in about 2 to 3 weeks. But one big point that they wanted to get across is that she is not campaigning. So she says in 2020, and will be supporting the president and campaigning on his behalf. But this is significant because this is one of the only high-profile women in the president's cabinet.
Paula, thank you. Caitlin, I want to get your take on the timing of all of this. She stressed that she has been working day in and day out for 8 years, very intense run as governor of South Carolina, and then the last 2 years at the UN. What do you make of that?
Well, the timing is very interesting. Yes, she talked about how long she's been in politics, and as we know, this kind of job is extremely strenuous, not only in terms of the actual time, but in terms of all of the players involved, and really becoming a professional on the issue of foreign policy when you're a former governor. There has been a lot that she has done at the UN, and she did tick off a list of what she believes to be her accomplishments. But as Paula mentioned, we're coming right off that Kavanaugh confirmation that the president wants to use as a selling point in the midterms and continuing to rally the troops around Republicans. And also, we're just a month away from the midterm. So having this kind of shakeup in the White House is not something that typically an administration would want just a month before the midterm. So it does raise questions about why now? Why not announce this resignation a few weeks from now once the midterms are over? Especially since she said that she is going to stay at till the end of the year. But big headlines for those in politics watching this is that she's not going to challenge the president. In fact, she says she plans to campaign for him in 2020. But I don't think we can discount her own political ambitions beyond this role. I think we'll expect to see her around politics for a while.
That was a big headline coming out of that she will be campaigning for President Trump in 2020. Right. On the phone with us is CBS News contributor Leslie Sanchez. Leslie, weigh in here. What are your thoughts after listening to this, and also about Haley's political aspirations? What are you hearing?
No, I think Caitlin's got it exactly right. What's fascinating is time is on Nikki Haley's side, not only because of the openings that it's going to create in the state, but she said a few interesting things. Aside from a very gracious exit that has the president's praise, which that in itself deserves a gold ribbon because that's a pretty difficult one to achieve. But she said, I believe in term limits. Coming from a state where the late Strom Thurmond was a senator there for 48 years that never created an opportunity for people to advance in the state. So I thought she grew up in a state that fundamentally she understood you have to create those opportunities. And she makes this point of saying you are selfless enough to exit. That's a really hard thing. Because, especially with someone wielding such tremendous political power. Again, it speaks to her tenacity, her vision, and kind of where she's aiming. She is somebody who can make very tough choices for her family and stand strong. She's also the one, I remind, that was the one who had to defend the president's exit of the Paris Accord and still managed to say that climate change is real. So she balances these political issues with opportunity and still manages to come out ahead. So she's definitely one to watch.
And Kylie, we heard the president say he will name Haley's successor within the next 2 or 3 weeks before the midterms, presumably. What stood out to you during that meeting between the two?
Well, I think Paula put it well when she talked about, how well this went for both of them. They were sitting there, they were smiling at one another, they were adorning one another with compliments. This was a very well orchestrated exit, and I think that speaks directly to Nikki Haley's political acumen. She really knows how to work this and how to not make it seem like there's any bad blood between the two so that she can push forward independently. Now, the big question is, what is she going to do? And also, who's going to step into this role? I want to point out that one name that is definitely going to be floated out there is the former Deputy National Security Advisor, Dina Powell. She left the administration after serving in that Deputy National Security role for a year. And then she went back to Goldman Sachs. But she has still remained a very close ally of this president. And when she left, there were also positive words thrust on her. Trump at that point said that she had sage advice. She'd been an invaluable member of the team. And we just saw on Twitter that Nikki Haley over the weekend spent the weekend in South Carolina. And who was there? Dina Powell. So that's someone to keep an eye on.
Leslie, let me bring you in because I know you worked with Dina Powell. What are you hearing?
Her name has always been floated around. Dina is one of the most respected, highly regarded women in politics because of her kind of foreign affairs acumen, but she's also someone who really knows how to get things done and bring together influencers to make change. She did it in the government by bringing different types of people. She was very strategic at identifying talent that may not have wanted to work in, for example, President Bush administration, and brought them in so the president would have a broad array of ideas that were counter to his own thinking. And then when she went to Goldman Sachs, she had this massive capacity to bring all these women together to look at a lot of issues beyond cultural affairs, but economic issues, kind of empowerment issues, access to capital, just a variety of things. So she is a real powerhouse that you always want to keep in the back of your mind, as anybody would be excited to tap her for a spot.
Senator Lindsey Graham from South Carolina also sent out a statement saying that Ambassador Haley has done an outstanding job as United States ambassador to the United Nations and showed a level of effectiveness rarely seen by someone in this position. As we have been reporting, it was a dignified meeting. It was Nikki Haley was extremely gracious, and it was very, very friendly. And I want to bring back in Paula Reed. Paula, when was the last time you saw President Trump heap this amount of praise on someone?
That's right. We keep using this term dignified departure, but this was great for Nikki Haley because she avoided, being fired by tweet, sort of insults lobbed in her direction, the sort of undercutting, public undercutting. This gave her an opportunity to heap praise on the president. And you saw her. She gave a full-throated defense of the president's agenda, though their work together at the UN. She said, look, the U.S. is respected. Other countries may not always like what we do, but they respect it. She said, quote, the U.S. is strong again. And then she went down almost the entire Trump family tree, praising each person individually. First Lady Melania Trump got a shout out for the kindness she'd extended to her. Obviously, the president, his daughter Ivanka, her husband Jared, and Nikki went all the way down. I mean, this was a very, again, we call it a dignified, but both sides benefit here because they're both getting sort of some praise and an endorsement from the other. Both the president is getting an endorsement from Nikki Haley, one of the few high-profile women in his administration before she departs, and she's promising him, look, I'm not going to run against you in 2020. In fact, I'll be on the campaign stage right next to you.
All right, I want to play off a little bit of what Paula was talking about. Caitlin, how does that factor in to maybe firing up the base even more?
Well, it's a really good question because we're about a month away from those critical midterm elections when the president, of course, is coming off that Kavanaugh appointment, and they are trying to figure out ways to keep the base stimulated. So if Nikki Haley were to depart under unfriendly terms, that would signify additional turmoil in the White House. That would not be the message that you want to send just weeks before a critical election when you're trying to make the case that Republicans should be in charge of governing. It does raise some questions, though, about why now? Why not wait a few more weeks till after the midterms? But the way in which they approach this, I think, signaled that they both want to make this transition as smooth as possible. And also for someone like Nikki Haley, we've talked about the idea that she has presumably ambitions beyond this post, potentially running for president at some point in the future. Remember, she still is very young. To have that praise from the president, to leave on friendly terms from this White House is a key calling card for whatever she wants to do in Republican politics, just given that the president is still very popular among Republicans and he is in charge of the Republican Party at this point. So leaving on good terms, I think, is really critical for her own ambitions beyond the UN ambassador.
She could not have been more gracious. Caitlin Huey-Burns, Kylie Atwood, Paula Reed, and Leslie Sanchez on the phone. Thank you so much for joining me, breaking this down. Again, if you just joined in, UN Ambassador Nikki Haley has resigned. She's going to be leaving at the end of the year, and we have just heard from President Trump heaping just loads of praise on her. She also thanked the president, calling it an honor of a lifetime. Coming up here on CBSN, we have new information on that massive Hurricane Michael that is barreling towards Florida. We'll be right back.